Washington, the nation.
It was going to be a beautiful day that early morning in Los Angeles in 1994. It was a holiday, the end of a 3-day weekend. Most of the city was asleep, taking it easy. The Earth was awake, however, and on the move.
The White House, President Clinton.
It's an earthquake. We're having an earthquake. Relax. Just stay right here. We're having an earthquake. Relax.
911. What is going on? Earthquake.
Okay, and this is Jay Lawrence with radio station KFI. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just, what I can say is we've just experienced a real whopper here, especially here at the radio station. We're trying to piece everything together. What I can say is Los Angeles apparently just had a major trembler.
So major that it has made the citizens and scientists worry about it ever since, if and when it might happen again. But at the time, there were more pressing and immediate problems.
Don't bend your legs.
Fire and paramedics. I can't see anything. Listen to me. Calm down. Okay, calm down because the fire department will come out, okay? Hold on a second.
It's an earthquake and I'm in my house. It's falling apart. I don't know what to do.
Ma'am, just stay calm.
I need the fire department in my apartment. The water's coming out of the back room. Some pipes get loose or something and hot water's
Okay,
in the room.
sir, the fire department does not handle that. You'll have to go out and turn the water off at the main.
The shock waves broke gas lines, igniting a series of fires. Water pipes ruptured, making water and flames bizarre neighbors. The water lay on the ground, reducing the pressure for the firemen's hoses. People sought shelter where there was none.
All units be advised, we have sustained a major earthquake in the LA basin. All unit battalions report on Blue 4.
In darkness, rescue workers tried to find people unable to help themselves. First impressions were that the earthquake was confined to the San Fernando Valley section of Los Angeles, 20 miles northwest of the center of the city.
There's reported the 10 freeway buckled or collapsed at Fairfax. Refrain from using the 10 freeway in either direction.
It was not just in San Fernando. 5 sections of motorways in different parts had collapsed.
I am southbound on the 5.
One man drove around with his video camera running.
And there's traffic in the southbound lanes coming at me in the #1 lane. And there's traffic. I've just taken a hit. There's a break in the road. There's traffic coming at me in the southbound lane. I'm in shock.
In Hollywood, the quake had brought down parts of some of the older brick buildings. Power lines were ripped from their sockets throughout the whole of the Los Angeles metropolitan area, adding darkness to the confusion.
After number 6, Jens, please! Is there somebody in there? A kitty, just a kitty!
Fire and paramedics.
I got people stuck trapped in the stockroom. The whole shelf came down. I got 2 girls stuck right now.
All right, calm down. Give me the address.
The nature of the problem?
She's having her second heart attack. She's 80 years old and she's not breathing.
Has the baby been born yet?
No, it has not.
Only as dawn broke could the full impact of the earthquake be appreciated.
There's a little hole right through here, man. Are you in a car? sounds like he's right here.
Sounds like he's right here.
Sounds like he's right. Hey, we're coming.
There were people still trapped and needing help.
I think he's right below you, Jerry. I think he's right here. Yeah, I couldn't tell.
Underneath the masonry of a fallen multi-story car park was Salvador Pena, a street sweeper. He was alive, but pinned down by concrete. Reports of other troubles were coming in from all directions. From the San Fernando Valley, the earthquake seemed to have traveled under a range of mountains, reappearing in Santa Monica, 18 miles away to the south. The widespread nature of the damage offered few clues about the epicenter of the earthquake. Hardly a part of the metropolitan area remained untouched.
This is KNX Los Angeles.
Okay, we are getting some preliminary information here. This is a 6.5, struck at 4:31. This, according to Dr. Lucy Jones at the Caltech Seismology Lab. These are preliminary. Yeah, go ahead.
She's not sure of a location, but she thinks that it may be in San Fernando Valley.
Somewhere in the San Fernando Valley for a possible epicenter, which, of course, is POW, right in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles city limits there.
Like everyone else, the media wanted information. They turned to the California Institute of Technology and its Earthquake Research Center, but scientists there were initially in the dark. The earthquake was so powerful that it had overloaded the computer system monitoring the scientists' ground sensors. For now, the information that would reveal the exact location of the earthquake's epicenter was unavailable to seismologists like Lucy Jones.
The waves from it came up and hit a lot of our stations at almost the same time, and it fit the pattern for microwave noise. Basically, the computer said, the ground is moving in so many places all at once. This can't be real. This must be a glitch in the microwave system, and threw it out. So when we got in there, instead of coming up with a location like we would hope to do, we often get a location within 2 minutes. Instead, we had the system saying, oh, nothing's happened. Well, yes, there was a bit of noise in the system. Nothing's happened. And we had to retrieve it.
Oh, my gosh.
No one needed sensors to feel the aftershocks.
Okay, come on back, come on back, come on.
There were dozens of mini earthquakes sending up dust storms in the mountains and valleys.
The one time we do know when an earthquake's going to happen is immediately after a big event. We know there are going to be aftershocks. Aftershocks are earthquakes. It's our one chance to get our instruments out before the earthquake happens.
The aftershocks and the resultant dust storms continued all morning. Each one provided an extra clue to where the seat of the earthquake was.
By getting the location of the aftershocks very, very exactly, we can see the details of the fault that produced the earthquakes. And we had 10 technicians in the field within 2 hours after the earthquake, because if we didn't, we'd have missed the events.
Within a few hours, the seismologists had also managed to retrieve the data initially lost by the computers. All the data pointed to the same fact. The epicenter of the earthquake had indeed been in the San Fernando Valley, directly under the community of Northridge, 23 miles northwest of Los Angeles city center. The Caltech geologist Jim Doland was among the first to fly over the epicenter to survey the scene.
The morning of the earthquake, we went up in a helicopter to try to find surface rupture, which helps us greatly in understanding which fault broke in the earthquake, which we were trying to determine the day of the earthquake. So we went up in a helicopter and spent several hours flying around the epicentral area and the area to the north, trying to find surface rupture.
Most earthquakes leave a surface gash in the Earth's crust, a superficial signal that reveals the subterranean fault that caused it. But not this time. Doland couldn't find any surface rupture caused by the Earth's movement, so there were no clues to which exact Earth fault was to blame.
It's one of those unfortunate instances where we had to have an earthquake to find out where the fault that broke in the earthquake was. We didn't know that the fault that broke in the Northridge earthquake existed before the earthquake.
The widespread damage left little doubt that Northridge was indeed above the center of the earthquake. There was the evidence of a housing complex called Northridge Meadows. It had been 3 stories high. Now it was 2.
Wait a minute. Hold up. You underneath that? Okay, he's right underneath here.
Dozens of people were trapped inside and underneath. Of the ultimate death toll of 57 people, 16 were found inside this one building.
We were laying in bed and someone broke a window and we just managed to crawl out.
And I went to sit up, to get up, and I realized the ceiling was on my head.
I climbed down the balcony. I grabbed my wife, ran like heck to the center of the complex.
And I was wedged between my mattress and the wall. And the mattress was up in the air and I couldn't figure out what it was doing there, why I couldn't push it back down.
Got thrown out of bed, run downstairs. It was running through glass that we didn't know was there.
There is no first floor anymore. It's gone.
I think I was in shock. And I tell you the truth, had I not been knocked unconscious, I think I might have died of a heart attack. It was that frightening.
You got a drop bag and all that? Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Oh, sure, we got
Yeah, glad we could help.
You guided me yesterday.
Yes.
You're welcome.
A few miles from the Northridge Meadows apartments, rescue crews were still trying to rescue Salvador Pena from the collapsed car park.
Right up here, guys, to lay him down. Right up here.
It took 4 hours to get him out. He was badly injured, but did eventually recover.
Everyone's initially very frightened, and then once the shock starts wearing off, you really want to know what happened. It's a very schizophrenic experience, a large earthquake. It's a very schizophrenic experience for a geologist or a seismologist who works on earthquakes, because on the one hand, the amount of energy that's involved in moving a chunk of the Earth's crust 10 miles thick, moving that thing 20 feet in a couple of seconds is mind-boggling, and it's extraordinarily fascinating. That's why we work on earthquakes, because they are so fascinating. On the other hand, when you're up in a helicopter flying around over Northridge the morning of the earthquake, looking at, derailed trains, buildings on fire, apartment buildings that have collapsed and obviously killed people, on a completely different level, on a human level, it's a devastating experience. So we're constantly trying to balance these two reactions to an earthquake.
There was surface damage all over the place, but no rupture in the Earth's crust. Doland and his colleagues knew its absence meant only one thing. The earthquake was the work of a blind thrust fault. A fault that cannot be seen. It ruptures but does not break the Earth's surface. The Northridge shock started deep underground and stopped 5 miles from the surface instead of going all the way to the top. Nevertheless, that did not diminish its destructive effect.
So it was much more difficult in the day or two after the earthquake to understand what had happened, because it's very easy to go out and see a road that's offset in an earthquake. It's much more difficult to understand something that happened 10 miles deep.
The Northridge blind thrust had lasted only 6 seconds. It took the city years to recover from its effects. Unlike San Francisco to the north, Los Angeles had experienced relatively few earthquakes in its short history. There have been only a few moderate shocks, not enough to deter the city from growing into America's center of the entertainment industry. In 1933, cameras shooting a W.C. Fields feature movie caught one of the moderate shocks on film.
young man. You probably saved my life. Now, what can I do for you?
Take us to Shanghai.
Shanghai?
Yeah.
What's the matter? Earthquake. Quick, take your time, folks. Now, everybody walk easy. It's all right now. It's all right. All right, okay. Everybody.
The shock that shook up W.C. Fields and everyone else was an earthquake centered on Long Beach, 21 miles south of the city center. It was the first recorded in Los Angeles since it had become a community of any size. It caught the city off guard. The city fathers were unaware of the need for building codes and safety measures. 115 people were killed and many buildings were destroyed. It was the first indication that Los Angeles had been sited above an active earthquake zone. All the same, seismologists at the time played down the risk. And for the following 40 years, they seem to have been proved right. "40 years in which the city boomed and spread in all directions. New suburbs with shopping centers stretched ever outwards, especially in the area known as the San Fernando Valley."
Notice the attractive curved streets in the convenient commercial area.
The only seismic hazard people worried about, and even then they didn't worry very much, was the San Andreas Fault, which bypasses Los Angeles in the desert 60 miles away. The San Andreas Fault is really an 800-mile-long crack where two of the Earth's giant tectonic plates meet. The North American plate lies to the east under San Francisco, while the Pacific plate on the west lies beneath Los Angeles.
Los Angeles is sitting on the Pacific Ocean plate, and it's being moved to the northwest compared to North America at a rate of just under a couple of inches a year. It's about the same rate that your fingernails grow. And in the 5 to 10 million years, we're going to have Los Angeles as a suburb of San Francisco, or San Francisco as a suburb of Los Angeles, depending on your point of view. And in 50 million years or so, we'll be actually heading up into Alaska, giving up on our palm trees.
The plates slide by each other in a north-south direction, but not always smoothly. The San Andreas is known as the strike-slip fault because the plates bump and grind as they rub against each other, passing in opposite directions.
It's the grinding, it's the slow, inexorable grinding of these two plates past one another that causes earthquakes. They stick in places. And when they stick, you build up strain because the plates on either side continue moving. Sticks, eventually it'll snap loose, and that's an earthquake.
It can take hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years for that strain to build up before an earthquake erupts. When it goes, it can be in one big quake. Or it is released with a series of smaller shocks. A geophysicist with the U.S. Geological Survey, Ross Stein, demonstrates what happens.
What you're looking at here is everything I know about earthquakes. And this really isn't as embarrassing an admission as it sounds, because really in this simple experiment, all of the behavior that we see in earthquakes is replicated. Now, what is the earthquake machine? It's this machine that is driven by steady motion of the plate's interiors, which is represented in this experiment by this winch, which I just crank steadily. It's got the elasticity of the Earth's crust. It's actually rubbery. It's pretty stiff, but it's rubbery. And it's got some mass that's in frictional contact with the surface. That's the fall. So by steadily loading up this system, I'm increasing the force on the brick. Okay, what just happened? We had an earthquake. Keep watching. And as the spring gets pulled in here, we're bringing up the loads again on the brick. So we've had a second earthquake. We'll let it go one more time. Okay. Now, were all these earthquakes of the same size? No, it's incredible. I can't create a situation that's any simpler than this, and undoubtedly the Earth is more complicated.
The magnitude of an earthquake is determined by the size of the area it covers and the length of its duration. This produces a sliding scale of severity. Larger quakes rated magnitude 7 or above are when the Earth relieves its strain all at once. Moderate earthquakes relieve the strain in stages but occur more frequently. There is a direct link between the San Andreas and all the faults under Los Angeles. For most of its 800-mile length, the San Andreas runs straight. Just north of Los Angeles, however, the fault takes a sudden turn. At this bend, the Pacific Plate and the North American plates no longer slide past one another, but collide head-on. Over eons, the constant banging at the bend has cracked the plate underlying Los Angeles into small pieces, creating a network of smaller faults like cracks on a pane of glass.
Because of that bend, all of the essentially broken shards of glass that makes up Southern California are being shoved up against a wall rather than just swept past it. And as they stack up against each other, these little pieces get jammed on top of each other. Some get pushed down, some get pushed up. We call that thrust faulting.
The collision of the two plates has compressed the Earth under Los Angeles, as though it were being squeezed in a vise. Every so often, the compression reaches a point where one piece of Earth is forced over another. The Earth above has nowhere to go but up. The result is an earthquake. Over time, the thrust faults that produce these earthquakes have shaped California's topography.
Earthquakes are what make California so wonderful. Whenever you see mountains in California, basically you should be thinking earthquakes, because there are probably faults pushing those mountains up. They have created all of our scenery and what give us our mountains, our valleys. Most of our water sources, our springs all form up along fault lines, and we'd look like Kansas if we didn't have our faults and our earthquakes. It'd be a much flatter topography.
In the hills overlooking Los Angeles, geophysicist Andrea Donnelland is measuring how much the Earth moves because of the compression. For the first time, scientists are learning the extent to which LA's landscape is being squeezed. From that, they can then gauge how much the strain is being caused by the thrust faults underground. Eventually, such information should provide clues about when and where LA's next earthquake may occur. Several years ago, Donnelland and her colleagues started to set up tiny antennas in various sites around Los Angeles to receive signals from orbiting satellites. Donnelland regularly monitors the position of the satellites relative to her receivers on the ground. She can then fairly simply determine whether the distance between the receivers has changed. Recently, they have inched closer together.
Ready?
This part of the Earth is shrinking, an indication that there is greater pressure underground along the fault lines.
We know the LA basin is shortening. We don't know where it's shortening or what faults are taking up that motion. If the strains are very high, if the Earth is moving very quickly, then we suspect that there's something going on. We know there's active tectonic deformation, and then we try to figure out what faults are responsible for that.
This forecasting has already begun to prove its worth. In 1987, Donnelland and her colleagues detected pressure building in the mountains northwest of Los Angeles. For 6 years, the strain intensified. It looked like the region might be working towards an earthquake. 2 months before the Northridge earthquake erupted, she and her colleagues forecast a magnitude 6.4 event in the mountains northwest of Los Angeles, an area which indeed included Northridge.
It looked like it was ready to snap because the strain was so high, which again means stress is building up, and also because there hadn't been an earthquake. And since the recurrence interval on these faults is 200 to 500 years, there hadn't been an earthquake in 200 years. We knew the earthquake could happen tomorrow or January 17th, or it could happen a century from now. We aren't sure, but it's as ripe. It seemed as ripe as any area in Southern California to break.
After the Northridge quake, Donnelland used the satellites to confirm that the thrust faults had raised the surface. The Northridge quake had indeed forced the ground upward, adding more than a foot to the mountains surrounding the northern edge of the city. Most of the mountains that ring Los Angeles sit on active thrust faults. Until recently, these mountains, or folds as geologists call them, were thought to grow very slowly, perhaps by only a few millimeters a century. But 2 recent earthquakes can cast doubt on that.
A couple of earthquakes dramatically changed our mind. In 1980, there was a magnitude 7.3 earthquake in Algeria at a place called El Asnam. What happened in that earthquake was we had one of these dipping faults, and we actually saw the fold forming above this fault grow as much as 15 feet during this earthquake. And it was very clear from this earthquake that folds did not always grow slowly by creeping up. And in fact, they could grow episodically in jumps during really big earthquakes. That point was hammered home 3 years later by the 1983 Coalinga earthquake in Central California.
That was an earthquake of magnitude 6.5, essentially the same size as Northridge, in an area where nobody thought a large earthquake could occur. It was on a blind thrust fault.
It was the first time that a blind thrust fault was known to cause earthquake damage in California. When the fault erupted, it did not break the Earth's surface and was not visible beneath the hills or folds outside of the town.
So the fault's down here, the fold's above it. The only thing we see at the surface is the fold. We didn't see the fault. People did not appreciate this as a seismic hazard.
The Coalinga quake took scientists by surprise, and initially they missed its importance.
At that time, a decade ago, the handwriting was on the wall. We should have fanned out in all directions and started hunting for these faults. We did so in a limited sense, and we began to realize that large earthquakes could occur underneath areas where there wasn't a fault at the surface, and of course Northridge is the most recent example of that.
So blind thrust faults could exist virtually anywhere in Southern California. If there was no break in the Earth's surface, there was little reason for geologists to investigate. But what now? Can these faults be located before an earthquake occurs? It turns out that another group of geologists, those looking for oil, have been studying the Earth's layers under Southern California for decades. Before Los Angeles was so big, petroleum geologists scoured the area in search of oil, sending down shock waves and producing hundreds of seismic maps of the Earth's crust. For years, they have known that petroleum is trapped in pools underneath the land that is folded into gentle hills.
Been a lot of oil prospecting in California, particularly in the LA basin. In urban LA, it produced billions of barrels of oil. That actually was good news. If you think about it, oil's less dense than water. It's going to flow up as high as it can go, and it'll typically flow up into the core of these folds, which we call anticlines.
The hills filled with oil were created by earthquakes along blind thrust faults. Tom Davis and Jay Namson are oil geologists who spent years making underground maps of Southern California. In their quest to find new sources of petroleum, Namson and Davis look for ancient hills that over millions of years have been hidden by other rock formations. Erosion may have made the landscape appear relatively flat, disguising the source of oil and the earthquake hazard underneath.
This was a very novel idea for the earthquake community, that there could be large earthquakes on faults that don't come to the surface. And to us, we had already been predicting those things throughout California. We just didn't realize the impact that it would have on seismic hazard studies in Southern California.
Okay, that'll be location 1.
To confirm their theory about hidden hills and the faults beneath them, the two geologists needed to know what the Earth looked like from the inside out. They gathered information. from both above and below the ground. Rock samples and the findings of sound waves on the Earth's subterranean structure helped them to compile pictures of cross-sections 15 miles below ground. The pair found blind thrust faults in areas never considered to be at risk from earthquakes. And one of those blind thrusts appears to run directly under central Los Angeles.
The moment of realization of this large fault under Los Angeles came when I really got all of the well data together, and to me it meant something as far as there had to be a very active large thrust under downtown Los Angeles that no one knew about.
He had never imagined Los Angeles could sit atop such a large and potentially dangerous fault.
And I spoke to a number of geologists at that time, and everyone was amazed, and the implications were clear to everyone within that. It was probably a few-week period, that if there really was a fault like this under downtown Los Angeles, it had some fairly serious implications as far as seismic hazard.
Davis originally called his discovery Fault A. It was later renamed as the Elysian Park Fault. Today, there are many who consider the Elysian Park to be the city's most serious earthquake threat.
The Elysian Park Fault could produce a really horrible earthquake. It could also produce a lot of Northridges, and we don't know. We don't have enough data right now, not because we can't know, but because the work just hasn't been done yet.
In 1987, just a few months after the Elysian Park Fault was discovered, Los Angeles got a taste of its destructive power. A small section of the massive fault shook just 18 miles from central Los Angeles in the suburb of Whittier.
In 1987, we had the real wake-up call for the Los Angeles area. We had the Whittier Narrows earthquake, a magnitude 6, really a pop on the record compared to Northridge. Nevertheless, on a blind thrust fault in LA, that's when we realized that LA is essentially sited on a set of knife blades. There are faults down there which we hadn't realized, and what we now have done is to look back around the world to other sites with similar conditions and see that earthquakes of magnitude 7 to 7.5 occur on these blind thrust faults, and so they presumably occur here as well.
Los Angeles woke up with a jolt to the danger of earthquakes. It was clear the entire city was crisscrossed underneath with blind thrust faults. Even a moderate earthquake along one of the faults could be highly destructive.
What this has led us to is the inescapable conclusion that we're not looking at one big one. We're looking at a number of different potential big ones. And I think that does represent a shift in the way we've appreciated seismic hazards in LA in the past few years.
After the Whittier earthquake, Los Angeles went from knowing little to finding out as much as it could. Today, experts believe that the city sits atop as many as 100 active earthquake faults, some of them lying beneath the most famous real estate in the country.
What I'm doing here is called paleoseismology. Effectively, that just means the history of earthquakes, or the earthquake history of a specific fault. What we do is we dig trenches like we're in right now, and look for beds that have been offset by earthquake faults. And we try, from various patterns that we see in the way they're offset, we can determine where earthquakes have occurred in the sedimentary record that we're looking at.
The beds Doland examines are actually layers of the Earth's crust, piled up over millions of years. Occasionally, there are visible deposits of charcoal left over from ancient brush fires. During an earthquake, a fault forces the land upward and knocks the layers and the charcoal out of alignment. By dating the deposits of charcoal within each offset layer, Doland can determine how long ago they were displaced by an earthquake.
by doing that, by getting the age on these deposits, we can develop a history of movement on these earthquake faults by how the beds have been offset.
This information gives Doland an idea how frequently faults tend to erupt, and that he hopes will help him to forecast future earthquakes. Many of the faults under Los Angeles have not moved violently for several thousand years and appear overdue to do so. High levels of stress may be building up under the city. Eventually, that pressure will be released in one of two ways.
Either we can have a number of Northridge-sized, San Fernando-sized, magnitude 6.7, moderately large earthquakes, or we can have a much larger, although much less frequent, earthquake, possibly magnitude 7 or larger, on one of these faults within the metropolitan area. Both of those scenarios are equally plausible, given what we know about faults in LA at the present time.
Recent history indicates that a series of moderate earthquakes is already well underway. Over the past 3 decades or so, Los Angeles has been hit by a series of 10 moderate earthquakes. That cycle began in 1971 with a magnitude 6.7 quake in the San Fernando Valley. It was the first significant earthquake to hit Los Angeles since the Long Beach disaster in 1933. It was followed by a cluster of 9 more earthquakes, including the one in Northridge.
We are averaging 1 damaging earthquake in Los Angeles every year for the last 6 years. And we don't know what that means. We don't know why it's happening, but it is happening. And when you have a lot of earthquakes, you tend to have a lot of earthquakes, which means that as long as we continue at this rate, we've got to say our chances of another earthquake in Los Angeles in the next few years are pretty good.
Ross Stein thinks it's possible that one earthquake may help to set off another. Quakes relieve stress along the fault where they occur. Stein wonders if that stress somehow transfers its energy to other faults nearby, pushing them even closer to their own breaking points. He created a computer model of LA's recent earthquake cluster to illustrate how stress seemed to move after each event. What emerged was a butterfly pattern that seemed to suggest both cause and effect among the quakes.
Now in this picture, we're plotting regions where the stress dropped in purple and places where the stress rose are red. And you can see that the stress dropped on the San Fernando Fault itself, but the stress has been transferred to its surrounding in this butterfly pattern. And of the 2 southern wings, you can see that one of the places where stress increased was the site of the future Northridge earthquake 23 years later, and the other one was the site of the future Whittier Narrows earthquake, the next largest shock to occur in the Los Angeles Basin area that occurred in 1987.
According to Stein's theory, the stress being passed from fault to fault creates a condition where one earthquake can accelerate the arrival of another.
Now, are any of these stress changes enough to cause an earthquake? No. They're very small. If, on the other hand, you imagine that all of these faults are stressed up to near failure, then these small changes could be important, and they could direct us to the places that have a higher probability of rupturing next.
The Northridge earthquake appears to have transferred its stress in 4 different directions. Along one of its paths lies a fault of special concern. It is the largest under the city and one that hasn't ruptured for centuries, a fault that may be close to breaking point. It is the Elysian Park Blind Thrust Fault, directly under downtown Los Angeles. The Elysian Park Fault is at least 35 miles long and runs through the heart of the city. It could shift in sections, causing a series of smaller quakes. Or it could lurch in one go, creating a massive magnitude 7 or 7.5 quake directly under Los Angeles.
The possibility of a magnitude 7.5 earthquake occurring directly beneath metropolitan Los Angeles the consequences would be truly devastating. Remember that for every unit of 1 you go up on the magnitude scale, you're releasing more than 30 times more energy. A magnitude 7.5 is 32 times more powerful than a magnitude 6.5. So a magnitude 7.5 earthquake underneath metropolitan Los Angeles would just be enormously more powerful and enormously more destructive than a Northridge type earthquake.
The possibility of such an event spurred the state of California into commissioning a study to consider what emergency crews might face. Its finding? 5,000 people might die. Damage could be up to $100 billion. Dick Andrews is director of the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. He makes a point of trying to get potential disasters into perspective.
Obviously, it would be a catastrophic event. But again, if you take all of the numbers of people injured, the potential numbers of fatalities, and then you consider that, again, there are 15 million people that live in the Southern California, the Los Angeles metropolitan area. You're talking about a very small percentage of the overall population.
This is how the Loma Prieta earthquake outside San Francisco looked in 1989. The shaking at the epicenter lasted for approximately 12 seconds. A magnitude 7 quake under downtown LA would shake twice as long.
And that means that a building that is fatigued by being shaken for a short period would be much more threatened by that longer period of shaking. So the difference is probably most important in the duration, how long everything is exposed to that strong shaking, as opposed to the shaking itself being stronger.
The impact upon Los Angeles skyscrapers is hard to gauge. They are built to comply with the nation's strictest building codes and are constructed with steel frames that used to be thought flexible enough to withstand any kind of shaking. That may not be the case. The Northridge earthquake revealed a slight, yet potentially disastrous problem. After the quake, welded joints holding together the metal beams were found to be cracked in over 100 steel-framed buildings. John Hall, a structural engineer, was among the first to realize what this means.
Some of the buildings which we previously thought were going to survive the earthquake without much trouble, the steel buildings, are going to have problems. Severe damage, some of them are going to collapse.
He worries if the welds come apart, some buildings could collapse, as happened during the 1985 Mexico City earthquake. So now Californians are trying to find ways to prevent this happening. Also, Los Angeles has over 2,000 miles of gas and water pipelines. If sections ruptured, a volatile mix of fire and water could spread over large parts of the city. Southern California's coastline would face a different kind of hazard, along the lines of what happened in the seaside community of Niigata in Japan in 1964, when it was hit by a magnitude 7.4 earthquake. Such an earthquake could churn LA's beaches and shoreline into a sea of mud, endangering hundreds of buildings and homes. According to the study commissioned by the state, 750,000 people could be left homeless by a magnitude 7 earthquake along the Elysian Park Fault.
People ask me frequently, where can I go in LA to get away from earthquakes? Should I move? And I think that's the wrong question. It's not a question of trying to get away from earthquakes, it's trying to learn to deal with them.
As Los Angeles cannot escape the threat of earthquakes, it must learn to prepare for them so that when the next one happens, the city is ready.
Clearly, you're never finally ready. for something like that. But you simply go with what you have, you know, when the emergency occurs. I like to cite a kind of takeoff on an old phrase of John Lennon's when he said, you know, life is what happens while you're busy making plans. We've discovered here in California, disasters are what happens while you're busy making disaster plans. And so you can't just focus on the plans. You got to be able to execute those plans.
The study of earthquakes is still a relatively young science. What little is known about the Earth's seismic secrets comes largely from earthquakes in the past and the clues each left behind.
So we feel like we're on the hunt of a process of which we know too little about. And Northridge is really continuing that story. Maybe we've seen a structure by which we can fit together this sequence of large earthquakes that we've had. Maybe not. We're sniffing around, but we're terribly short of all the clues that we need. In a sense, we've got a few cards, but we're never dealing with the whole deck.
Each tremor brings a little more understanding, not just in Los Angeles, but in earthquake zones throughout the world.
Many of the major cities of the world are located in sedimentary basins similar to that of Los Angeles and may also be having problems with blind thrusts, and they just haven't had the study to figure that out. So we have the potential here for helping not only Los Angeles but the rest of the world.
Science expands its understanding at roughly the same pace that seismic pressure continues to build underneath Los Angeles. In Southern California, now the world's seismic crucible, where men and nature aspire to outwit each other, the question is no longer if, but when the earthquake will strike.